all meeting regulations found in the members' congressional handbook. The current handbook regulations allow members of the House to co-host in-person town hall meetings with members representing adjacent congressional districts. This handbook update will allow members of the House to co-host telephone and internet or virtual town hall meetings with another member, even if the congressional districts are not adjacent. This update will offer additional flexibility to members when communicating with their constituents via virtual town hall meetings. I would now like to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Brady, for the purpose of providing an opening statement if he desires.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I support the committee resolution before us today. This change to our members' handbook will allow members to communicate with their constituents about regional issues, allowing constituents more meaningful access to their government. I appreciate that bipartisan work in developing this proposal and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. I would ask if any other member of the committee wishes to be recognized for the purpose of providing an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman?
You recognize the gentlewoman from California.
I don't have an opening statement, but I just wanted to clarify, I think it's permitted, but I wanted to get on the record, that you could have more than one adjacent member. For example, I had a town hall meeting once there were 3 members who were adjacent to each other on a topic held at the county, board chambers. So this is not restricted to 2 if there are, in an urban area, for example, there are oftentimes more than 2 who are adjacent. And with that clarification, I would.
The chair would agree with that interpretation. As long as they are adjacent, it can be more than 2.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I now call up and lay before the committee a resolution 115-20 to approve the update to the members' congressional handbook. Without objection, the first reading of the resolution is dispensed with, and the resolution is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Is there any debate? Are there any members who wish to offer an amendment to the resolution? If not, I move the committee adopt the resolution. The question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Without objection, the markup is adjourned. Committee will take just a moment to prepare for the next segment. I now call to order the Committee on House Administration for today's hearing examining the strategic plan of the Library of Congress. The hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days, so members may submit any materials they wish to be included. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. The Library of Congress is an unparalleled institution There's simply no other library nor institution within America quite like it. With over 167 million collections items, from maps to photographs, newspapers, movies, baseball cards, manuscripts, new books, rare books, and all kinds in between, its repository of knowledge is unmatched. While the library's location and components have changed over time, its fundamental mission to serve Congress with that repository has not. The library was created by Congress in 1800. From its founding until 1897, the library was housed in the Capitol. In 1815, Thomas Jefferson sold his famous personal collection to Congress for the new library. In 1832, the law library was created. In 1870, copyright law vastly expanded the library's collections' breadth and depth. In 1896, the Joint Committee on the Library held important hearings on the future of the library, which were instrumental in setting the strategy for the library headed into a new century. In 1914, the Legislative Reference Service was created to assist Congress, later becoming the CRS we know today. In 1939, the Adams Building opened, followed by the Madison Building opening in 1980. Understanding that knowledge, objectivity, and primary resources are vital to healthy and thriving deliberative Congress and body politic, the library has served and continues to serve Congress and the American people to this day. As history has shown, the library adapts and grows, which is why we're here. Almost exactly 1 year ago, Dr. Hayden, you testified before this committee about your then beginning stages of the library's strategic planning for the future. We are here today to receive an update on your progress. When will the strategic plan be completed? What are its key characteristics and components? What has the library learned about itself over the past year? These are questions we hope to have answered today as we assess the library's ability to meet the demands and challenges and the mission into the 21st century. I want to thank our excellent panel for their appearance before the committee today, and I'd now like to recognize the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Brady, for the purpose of providing an opening statement. Mr. Brady.
Yeah, I want to thank the chairman for calling this hearing today and thank the witnesses for the testimony. The Library of Congress is an amazing place, not only for members, but for our constituents as well. Though like any other institution of its size, the library has its share of management issues. Since 2011, the Library Inspector General has been recommending the library develop a strong strategic plan to deal with these challenges. Under Dr. Hayden's leadership, the library is engaging in doing such a plan, and it will soon be up to Congress to make sure we do our part to make the plan a reality. Again, I also thank the witnesses, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized for the purpose of an opening statement? Seeing none, I'd now like to introduce our panel of witnesses. Dr. Carla Hayden was sworn in as the 14th Librarian of Congress on September the 14th, 2016. And in a city where history is made, Dr. Hayden certainly made history. The first woman and the first African American to lead the National Library, was nominated to the position by President Barack Obama on February the 24th, 2016, and her nomination was confirmed by the United States Senate on July 13th, 2016. I have to say, it seems like you've been here longer than July of 16. Prior to that, she served as CEO of the Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore, Maryland. She's also been a member of the National Museum and Library Services Board, Deputy Commissioner and Chief Librarian of the Chicago Public Library, an Assistant Professor for Library and Information Science at the University of Pittsburgh, and Library Services Coordinator for the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. She began her career with the Chicago Public Library as a Young Adult Services Coordinator and as a Library Associate and, dear to her heart, Children's Librarian. Dr. Hayden was president of the American Library Association from 2003 to 2004, and in 1995, she was the first African American to receive Library Journal's Librarian of the Year Award in recognition of her outreach services at the Pratt Library, which included an after-school center for Baltimore teens offering homework assistance and college and career counseling. Dr. Hayden received a BA from Roosevelt University and an MA and PhD from the Graduate Library School of the University of Chicago. Inspector Kurt Hyde has extensive experience in both the public and private sector. Prior to joining the library, Mr. Hyde was the Deputy Inspector General for Audit and Evaluations at the Special Inspector General for the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP. Similarly, he was the Deputy Assistant Inspector General for the Resolution Trust Corporation during the savings and loan financial crisis in the 1990s. His other government services entail working at the Government Accountability Office and as a senior executive at the Department of Transportation Office of Inspector General. Before joining the library, Mr. Hyde, a certified public accountant, was a partner in the government services practice at a Big Five accounting and consulting firm where he advised the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid on their implementations of Medicare Plus Choice and other government clients on customer-centric solutions. Now I'd like to introduce Mrs. Diane Houghton is the, and did I pronounce that right? Is the Senior Advisor and Director of the Strategic Planning and Performance Management Office at the Library of Congress. In this role, Ms. Houghton is responsible for enterprise-level planning and performance management activities, including development of the library's strategic plan. She is also leading an initiative to update and integrate the library's planning, performance management, and risk and internal control program frameworks. Before joining the library, Ms. Houghton was the Chief Operating Officer of New Leaders, a national nonprofit that develops transformational school leaders. During this time, she managed the organization's technology, finance, strategic planning, and talent management teams while rebuilding the leadership team and overseeing the design and launch of expanded services. Before her work with New Leaders, Ms. Houghton was the Chief Executive Officer of Digital Focus, Inc., a technology solutions provider. There she led a dramatic performance turnaround, establishing profitability within 5 months after 4 years of losses. She also served as President, COO of Jaffe Associates. She doubled the organization's size and revenues, which led to her being named to the Inc. 500 list of fastest growing private companies by Inc. magazine. Before filling executive roles, Ms. Houghton was a management consultant, working with many Fortune 100 companies and government organizations to create and launch strategic initiatives. She is also the co-author of the book, Visions, Values, and Courage, Leadership for Quality Management. You've all exhausted me. I mean, what these, it's amazing credentials, and we thank you for being here. And we've received your written testimony. You will each have 5 minutes to present a summary of that submission. To help you keep your time, you know how it works. The timing device that is there on the table will be a green light for the first 4 minutes. It will turn yellow when a minute remains, and when the light turns red, the trap door will, no, I mean, the light turns red, it means your time has expired. And we are honored to have each of you here and look forward to this. So the chair now recognizes our witnesses for purposes of an opening statement, and we will begin with you, Dr. Hayden.
Good morning, Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee. I am very pleased.
I don't
and
know
now
that
the microphone is on, I will reiterate my greeting to Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee, because I am very pleased to be here today to provide an update on the library's strategic plan and to give more information on the accomplishments so far and the progress that we've made. And I want to begin by thanking the committee for its support and commitment to the library in its over 200-year history. I am now in my second year as librarian, and I'm even more committed to doing all that I can to ensure that the library's unparalleled collections and resources are available to all. And those resources, of those, the strongest, I believe, are the expertise and the commitment to public service of the dedicated staff. And it was just a year ago that I first addressed this committee on the topic of strategic planning, and I'm pleased today to share with you that we are on track to publish by October 1st a plan to guide our activities over the next 5 fiscal years. The new strategic plan establishes a framework for the entire agency that is driven by our mission to serve Congress and the American people. Our mission incorporates the key elements of what we do and why we do it and for whom. And it is, quote, to engage, inspire, and inform Congress and the American people with a universal and enduring source of knowledge and creativity. And with that core mission reinforced, the new strategic plan takes shape around unifying concepts important to every unit in the organization, and the most critical of which is a clear and persistent focus on users. We established a user-centered direction forward. That means that we will enrich the library experience for all users, including, first and foremost, members of Congress who may engage with the Congressional Research Service or read books from our stacks, creators who draw inspiration from our collections or use the services of the Copyright Office to protect their creative work. Institutions like libraries and schools who serve as connectors between the users and the Library of Congress, and learners of all ages who use our unique and trusted resources to learn about history, civics, and any other part of our shared cultural heritage. As I testified last year, establishing a strategic vision and structure for the agency's future has been a top priority for the agency and for me. To date, we have taken several important steps to make that happen. The Office of Strategic Planning and Performance Measurement and Management, headed by Director Diane Houghton, who reports directly to me, has been hard at work over the last 15 months strengthening the agency's overall strategic directional and operational planning process. Consistent with best practices, the library has developed a strategic plan with input from hundreds of library employees, managers, and leaders. All library service units have played a key role, as have external stakeholders and users, and we have regularly consulted with our congressional oversight committees throughout the process. And as a result, 4 agency-wide principles have emerged as our unifying goals: expanding access, enhancing service, optimizing resources, and measuring impact. The plan, which is now near completion, will be accompanied by new or revised service-level unit directional plans, which are on track to be completed by January 2019, and will speak to each unit's mission-specific goals and objectives. I thank the IG, Mr. Hyde, for acknowledging our progress and agree with the essence of the report. It is essential that the library build a mature, data-driven, and impactful planning and performance management system. It will, as noted in his report, take several years along a carefully planned trajectory to achieve the result, and the report certainly provides helpful guidance. I also wanted to take a moment to discuss the strides we're making to make performance matter, including the successful launch of a new performance management system in FY 2016. For the first time, the agency is working to instill a performance culture that is grounded by regular review of performance at the executive level. And in addition, internal risk control and management continues to be of central importance. The library designed, piloted, and launched our first agency-wide risk management process nearly a year ago. And so in closing, the library is poised to implement a unifying strategic plan that is user-centered and forward-thinking, one that will facilitate measurable agency outcomes as we continue to make advances in planning. So thank you for providing me this opportunity for an update.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hayden. The chair will now recognize Mr. Hyde for 5 minutes for the purposes of his opening statement.
Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the Library of Congress's strategic planning and performance management and the work being done by my office in this area. As you know, strategic planning and management has been on the IG's list of the library's top management challenges since September 2011. We put it on the list because many of the challenges over the years have flowed from the library not having proper strategic planning framework in place. By that I mean the library has not been able to effectively identify strategic goals, stay focused on meeting those goals, and hold itself accountable when the goals are not met. We believe that this resulted in lost opportunities. We demonstrated this in our April 2015 report on the library's e-deposit program, an effort to collect digital materials. The audit highlighted the importance of leaders staying involved and focusing on accountability. We could not determine whether progress on the program had met management's expectations after 5 years of effort because library leadership at the time had not established quantifiable expectations related to cost, performance, and project completion. Under Dr. Hayden's leadership, the library has taken a stronger approach. For example, Dr. Hayden has elevated the CIO and Director of Strategic Planning positions to report directly to her, which sends a strong message and comports to best practices. She has mandated a new collaborative library-wide strategic plan integrated with unit plans. And she required her high-level executives to discuss the status of priority performance goals at monthly executive committee meetings, something that had not been done previously. The library is at the start of a long-term process to get on track. We reported last week calling for continued persistent focus to strengthen the library's strategic planning management, identifying the practices that would serve the library well as it looks to strengthen this area. And those 6 practices are improving its focus on users, implementing a planning and performance culture at the executive level, creating a strategic plan that meets federal government standards, creating a human capital linkage to planning and performance, linking budgetary resources to expected performance results, and managing a risk across the library's service units when planning and conducting performance management. Dr. Hayden's focus in some of these areas, such as addressing users' needs and focusing on creating a performance culture, is definitely a step in the right direction. Because the library is still in the early stages of building its management capacity in this area, it needs to be vigilant about ensuring success with strategic planning over the long term. As the saying goes, the library will be building the plane while flying it. Since Dr. Hayden is piloting the library through this process, her persistent leadership and guidance will be vital. Progress will not occur with the delivery of random and unconnected tasks. The imperative is ensuring follow-through on their execution of the implementation roadmap and year-to-year driving of the synchronized unit plans. In addition, as stated in our top management challenges, the library must execute a thoughtful digital strategy that integrates with the other plans. An enormous amount of quality data will have to be collected, analyzed, and reported as part of this process. Strategic planning and performance management pay dividends when executives make tough priority decisions based on performance data. It will take time for the library to successfully develop and implement a more robust planning framework, one that includes goals with specific and aggressive outcomes that can be used to evaluate performance using verifiable metrics. Thank you for this opportunity to address the committee. I ask that our July report be admitted into the record as my formal written testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. The chair will now recognize Director Houghton for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Harper, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to provide testimony on strategic planning at the Library of Congress and to share the progress we've made in developing a strategic plan that puts forward a clear and exciting vision for the agency's future. In the spring of 2017, we set the stage for our planning work by launching our Envisioning 2025 initiative. Over the next 7 months, we engaged more than 350 staff and managers from all parts of the library to explore, research, and discuss trends and topics vital to the agency's future. During this work, leaders from across the agency recognized the need to establish some shared language. We felt an effective strategic plan for the library must build on concepts that transcend our organizational boundaries and unify our discrete service units. As a result, we now define the role of the agency in a way that resonates with all parts of the library, echoing the organizing principles Thomas Jefferson applied to his personal library through the concepts of memory, knowledge, and imagination. Memory refers to our work to acquire, sustain, and provide access to a unique and universal collection. Knowledge refers to providing authoritative and objective research, guidance, analysis, and information. And imagination refers to inspiring and encouraging creativity and promoting and supporting the protection of the work of creators. We also developed a shared view of key user groups across the agency, defined as Congress, creators, learners, and connectors. And finally, and most importantly, we agreed on a user-centered direction forward. With this foundation, strategic planning activities were launched in December with a team comprised of agency staff and consultants who were engaged to help expand our planning capability and to educate staff in planning concepts and techniques. Over the winter and spring, we moved through our planning process, including structured research and analysis of many different sources of information, workshops, open forums, exercises, and strategy labs. And consistent with best practices, our approach has remained highly participative in all activity. We've engaged over 500 staff and managers, both here on Capitol Hill and at our Culpeper campus. We've engaged library users and stakeholders through surveys and interviews, and we've received input and shared approaches from similar information-based organizations and peer agencies. The result is a strategic plan that will guide the agency in expanding our reach and deepening our impact with our users. It begins with our vision. We've crafted an aspirational vision statement that speaks to the sense of connection that we hope to build to the nation's people, your constituents. Our vision is that all Americans are connected to the Library of Congress. The vision reflects our strong commitment to focusing on our users, better understanding their needs, and making our universal and enduring source of knowledge and creativity more discoverable, accessible, relevant, and useful. We next agreed upon a set of goals and objectives to drive this vision of connection. Our first goal is to expand access, making our unique collections, experts, and services available when, where, and how users need them, whether visiting Capitol Hill or accessing the library remotely. Our second goal is to enhance services, creating valuable experiences for every user by elevating digital experiences, transforming in-person experiences, and developing more user-centered content. Our third goal is to optimize resources, continuing our work to modernize, strengthen, and streamline our operational capabilities, and invest in our staff for the future. And our fourth and final goal is to measure impact by committing to use data to better understand our users and to measure the impact of our collections and services. The coming months hold important milestones for our work, including communication and release of the strategic plan at the start of the fiscal year, completion of the service unit level planning aligned to the new plan, and elevation of key work and initiatives from these unit level plans to an agency level implementation roadmap. This roadmap will be the means to track and report on the fulfillment of our strategic plan commitments in the years ahead. I thank the committee again for inviting me to provide testimony, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you so much, Director. It's now time for the members to ask questions of you as witnesses, and I'll begin with by recognizing myself. And Dr. Hayden, I have some questions related obviously to the strategic plan completion. As you mentioned in your testimony, you plan on this being completed and released on October the 1st, I believe?
Yes.
With a little over 2 months until that date, are you fully committed to that deadline? Do you anticipate any deviation from that?
We are on track to meet the deadline, and we are actually very excited about being able to make sure that the expectation that it will be presented on October 1st will be met. So the excitement is building even 2 months away.
Gotcha. As you also stated, strategic planning does not and will not end on October 1st.
No.
In November, an implementation roadmap will be completed to execute the plan. In January of next year, service units will have operational unit and center directional plans in place to guide their specific metrics-based priorities and progress during the plan's time frame. How will you ensure the service units under your leadership will remain committed to and, in fact, be enthusiastic about the overall plan and their specific directional plans?
Keeping the enthusiasm and the accountability and tracking together are going to be a major focus. And as was noted in the report, the IG report, the book execution really discusses, and that's something that I'm very committed to, that we make sure that the tracking takes place at each executive level committee meeting, and that's already in place now, and we will be making that a regular feature, as well as having each of the service units present their progress on their service unit activities. And so the baking it in the cake, basically, it's not going to be a plan that sits on a shelf and there's a lot of enthusiasm and here's the plan. It is a living document and it will be revised and reviewed continually.
Okay, are you making any changes or will you change anything about how you hold your leaders accountable?
One of the main things that we will continue to do, and this is not a change because we've been doing it in the past year of having the reporting out and presenting. We will be trying to make sure that there are more opportunities for more unit-level staff members to have a reporting opportunity at different forums as well. And Ms. Houghton we've talked quite a bit about how do we make sure that as many staff members as we can are able to talk about what they are doing in their units and subunits for the plan as well. So it's not just at the executive leadership level, but that there are other opportunities.
As you know, in 2015, the Government Accountability Office concluded a very lengthy IT audit of the library. They made 31 public recommendations. The IT health, security, and capabilities of the library are paramount to your vision achieving success. Will all 31 recommendations be closed when the strategic plan is unveiled?
The recommendations, and that's a wonderful story to be able to tell. Of those 31 public recommendations, 20 have been completed and approved by GAO, with 6 more that are being reviewed, and the remaining 5 will be submitted by the end of September, and the evidence will be presented then. So we're very pleased with the progress that's been made on those recommendations.
And I know that security and IT challenges, cybersecurity challenges, are always an ongoing challenge for everyone. And I'm pleased to know that you're staying on top of that. How will your vision, as you've seen in this plan, how is that going to continue to guide the library for years to come?
My vision as librarian is really an extension of what I have known and have come to in this past 2 years, really appreciated even more, of the dedication of the staff members who have worked to preserve and conserve and collect materials and to make those materials accessible and to generate service to Congress at the highest level, as well as to inspire people to be creative and use our copyright system. And so that vision of expanding and sharing with the American people and anyone that wants to participate is even more of a watchword. I frankly get very excited thinking about the possibilities, and to know that so many staff members at the Library of Congress are dedicated and right there and ready to go is very heartening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hayden. I'll now recognize Ranking Member Brady for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hayden, I want to thank you for your visiting my district in September, for spending time in the Darby Library.
Yes.
The Darby Library opened in 1743 and is the oldest continuous operating library in the country. And your visit really uplifted all the people that were there, all the volunteers. As you well know, there are many, many volunteers that are there. And again, I want to thank you. They still can't stop talking about your visit there. And again, the oldest library in the country. How do community libraries like the Darby Library benefit from the strategic plan?
What's been heartening in the visit to Darby was one example. The idea in communities throughout this country, and I've been visiting different states and going to rural areas. I've been in Illinois and West Virginia and Arkansas and Mississippi and all of the states. Whenever I go in Ohio and Michigan, and keep going, every time I talk about the Veterans History Project, being able to have local veterans record their histories, talking about live streaming programming from the Library of Congress, traveling exhibits, expanding the reach, put the digitized collections. People throughout this country are proud to know that the Library of Congress can serve them, and they're very excited because it allows community libraries to focus on their specific community needs and know that they have this wonderful resource at their fingertips and available to them. So that's been the real synergy, and there's a real hunger in the country to really take ownership and say, wow, the Library of Congress. And people are also saying, you would come to us. And that's what we really want to expand, that access, and let everyone know that the Library of Congress serves the American people.
And how will this plan benefit people as they use the library day to day? How will a constituent using library resources, a librarian working within the Library of Congress, staff are working within the CRS benefit? How do they benefit because of this reorganization?
Each of the service units, and Ms. Houghton mentioned that, are developing their unit plans that will be very focused on their particular users. So the Congressional Research Service will be looking at their users, the Congress and staff, and how they can make sure that those services are more efficient and effective, and really taking care of that. The copyright community and the creators, how can those operations be modernized and more responsive? And of course, library services, the real heart of the collections would be focused on researchers, scholars, young people. All of the service units will be focused on their particular users.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you for your service. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brady yields back. Chair will now recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Brady. Also, thank you, Dr. Hayden. I appreciate all you've done at the library, and since they've asked you a lot of questions, I'm going to move over to Mr. Hyde, but I want to tell you I appreciate you coming to my district not too long ago and touting the successes of the library. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Inspector Hyde, I thank you also again for being here today. Inspector Generals by nature often live a professionally friendless existence, and I hope that's not the case with you. But we appreciate your commitment to a sound and transparent Library of Congress operation. Your office has flagged the library's strategic planning for years, as seen in your most recent report released just a week and a half ago. My question is simple. What has the library been lacking, and why did it take so long for somebody like Director Houghton to be brought on board?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think that what had been lacking, and this is what is encouraging about what we're seeing so far, because it's different. It's top-down leadership. Strategic planning is all about top-down leadership. And there needs to be a persistent focus on that. And it's not the most exciting thing in a lot of respects for execution, because you're talking about it daily, weekly, monthly with the executives, and you're making sure that there's, we talked about the intricacies here about the delivery to the user, and it can be very complex, so it's important that everybody stays focused and on target.
Okay, along that same line, Inspector Hyde, what insights can you share with this committee about the library's strategic planning efforts over the last year and a half? And we're nearing the completion of the plan, and are you satisfied with the process by which the library constructed its plan? And do you believe it adhered to the best practices practiced by other large libraries, cultural institutions, or government agencies?
I am very encouraged. And I think what doesn't show up when you actually see the strategic plan itself, the document itself, it can be a few pages long, is you don't see all the effort that went into putting it together. And we have been very encouraged by the effort by the library of putting it together, identifying their users, and in addition, I think the things that they need to put in place in order to make sure the execution over the next 5 to 10 years takes place. So I'm very encouraged.
Well, I'm glad you're encouraged. I am too. And frankly, that's good to hear from you, because when my librarians that we met with in Rochester, Illinois, with Dr. Hayden came to see her, they had fans. They said, I'm a Carla Hayden fan. I still have one, and I am too.
They have one for me too?
Yeah. Well, last, I want to say, I want to ask, once this plan's released, do you have any concerns with the library's ability to implement it and execute it? And does the library have the proper leadership and tools at their disposal to make sure this plan gets executed?
I think they're on the right track. I think they're developing the tools. I think that there is some new areas of focus, which they've had before, but I think it's a concentration, which, for example, is on identifying the users. That's the important thing there is to collect good user information. We all go through surveys, periodic surveys. That's what it is. And so how do you collect that information? How do you analyze it? And then how do you make changes to your delivery? That's going to be new for them, and I think they're going to need some resources there. And I think also they're going to need resources in executing on their strategic plan.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for being here today. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair will now recognize Ms. Lofton for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. And it's pretty clear from all the witnesses that we're very much on the right track here, and that's very good news. Just a couple of, I don't want to say small questions, but picky questions. The publication of CRS reports has occasioned some criticism. I'm not suggesting I agree with all the criticisms, but I'm wondering, Dr. Hayden, I received a letter or a missive from Demand Progress suggesting various alternatives to the website that might be more cost-effective. I know the Demand Progress people, they're very capable. Have you met with them, or would you be willing to sit down with them and get their suggestions firsthand and see whether any of them would actually work for the library?
The CRS reports and the mandate to make them the R class available is on track to be launched in, and I have the date, September 18th of this coming year. And we have considered as many things as we can to make sure that that timeline is being met. And so being able to incorporate any other information, I think would be helpful. but we are definitely going to be on track for that
Right.
September 18th.
Well, what maybe I can do then is just give you the material that was
That would
sent
be
to me,
helpful.
and you can, you know,
Right.
evaluate that. I do think, though, in terms of their digital experience, it's quite extensive. And I wanted to ask you a question about the Copyright Office. They are part of this whole modernization effort, which is excellent. On the 1201 exemption rulemaking, you announced a streamlined process that would allow a petitioner to file a simple 5-page petition for renewal. I think that's a tremendous improvement over past practices and will save everybody a lot of time on stuff where there's really no disagreement. What I'm wondering is, can this process be streamlined even further? For instance, could the library itself take on the role of petitioning the Copyright Office to renew exemptions rather than making companies or universities do it? And does the Copyright Office even need petitions to renew exemptions? If I recall correctly, the basis of the office's de novo review of exemptions comes from report language of just one of 3 committees of jurisdiction on a substantially different bill, and that was ultimately stripped out of the final bill report. So I'm wondering, what comes to mind, for example, is the exemption for the use of the blind. Nobody's objecting, you know, and yet it's this huge process and dust up, and it's just a waste of time. And I'm wondering if you have looked at that, or whether you could look at the de novo review process as I've outlined here.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I want to take this opportunity to say that Acting Register Karen Temple is doing an outstanding job, and she is actually now considering, for the record, each of the proposed and new expanded exemptions.
I didn't mean to downplay the improvements, because they're excellent.
Right.
I just
But
wanted to go to my
she is actually considering that, and I understand that her recommendations will be available in late October of this calendar year. And so in her role, that's her role to actually advise.
Very good. I'm wondering, and very quickly, on the law library, I know that we've made some changes there, and the question is whether the law library will continue to play the role that it has traditionally with the changes that have been made. The law library plays an enormous, important role, not just for the United States, but for the world. For example, when Afghanistan finally emerged from the Taliban, the only place in the world that had their laws was the Library of Congress Law Library.
The Law Library of the Library of Congress, a separate service unit, is the world's largest and most comprehensive collection of legal resources, and it is entirely devoted to making sure that those materials and resources are available not only to Congress, but also some of the federal judicial system as well. And the reporting structure in the library, the alignment, is to make sure that the law library, like the other service units, copyright and CRS, can concentrate on their mission-specific activities. So they will continue to be independent. They will have their own management of their collections and will operationally function the way they are now.
That's great. Thank you so much for the great work you've done.
That's a wonderful
Dr.
library.
Hayden, yes. Thank you. I yield back, Ms.
Gentlewoman yields back. Chair will now recognize Mr. Loudermilk for 5 minutes for questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Especially, I appreciate the work as a frequent user of the library. I do value our Library of Congress, and am a strong advocate to make sure that it is there for the needs of Congress, especially in the time where knowledge is very important. And coming from an IT background, I've worked with many companies in implementing strategic plans, and I know the value of it. One thing I appreciate, Dr. Hayden, is the lack of overdue fees for members of Congress, and I promise the book will be back before we go on on our August break, and I appreciate the prompt service that we get with Congressional Research Service and even from the library, or STACS, I believe, as you guys call it. Inspector Hyde, a couple of questions for you. First of all, I appreciate all of our Inspector Generals, around the core of Inspector Generals that we have, because I know in serving on several other committees, quite often the Inspector General is not looked upon in a very favorable light by those. And looking from your background, you've been into a lot of organizations that I just from looking at your bio, I anticipate you had a lot of work to do, and especially eliminating fraud, waste, and abuse, and I appreciate that kind of work. In your testimony, you mentioned that, I believe it was since 2011, there's been a need for a strategic plan. Is that about the time you came on, or?
No, I came on in 2014.
Okay.
Or 2013, and so, but it had already been, not just strategic planning, but performance management had been discussed for quite some time of the changes that were needed at the library.
Okay. Was there a strategic plan before 2011?
There were strategic plans, or what they would call strategic plans, but then I think the issue was, as far as execution of those plans.
Okay, so there was a strategic plan in place.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying there was a strategic plan in place. Forgive me.
The challenge for the library was that there were fits and starts, what I would say. So they would have a strategic plan, then there would be no execution or little execution of that strategic plan, and then they would have a new something that could be construed as a strategic plan, and again, no to little execution. I think this is where it was fits and starts, but they would have underneath that, they would have initiatives, major initiatives. Leading up to, before Dr. Hayden came on board, there was a strategic plan that was crafted, and primarily by that leadership, there was an interim leadership, to try to just keep the library moving forward until there was a new librarian put in place. Okay,
so that's the strategic plan that's the 2011 to 2017 that is currently out there?
That was the I think it was the 2016 through the 2020 plan that was put together.
Okay. Well, there is a plan that was dated 2011 to 2017.
Right. I believe, I have to check on that. I'll go back and look at our working papers and get back to you on that. But I think that there may have been something.
Okay. I've got a copy of it, so
okay.
I can share it.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
And my question is getting to what was the need for a new strategic plan? Was it the strategic plan that was flawed, or was it the just lack of implementation?
I think it was a combination. One of the things that we have stated in the past on strategic planning was that there were insufficient outcome-oriented goals that were in prior strategic plans or documents that related to that. Certainly what we have identified is the execution of that. As you probably know, it takes a lot of dogged effort throughout many years to execute on those goals, and I think that's what we were finding was the problem.
And just one last question, because I see the yellow light is on, and I can submit the other ones for the record that we have for follow-up. But in the new strategic plan, does the mission statement change at all?
The mission statement. Now, I've been updated on this, but I think that the mission statement. They have re-looked at that mission statement and added other elements to it, if I recall correctly. I can
Okay. I appreciate it, because I know the mission statement, at least in the 2011, was to support the Congress in fulfilling its constitutional duties and to further the progress of knowledge and creativity for the benefit of the American people. I just want to make sure that we are still focused on the core element. The Library of Congress exists predominantly to support Congress, but I also applaud the other things that we're doing, especially if the strategic plan is generally guided to incorporate the new technologies that we have. So that's really where I was kind of getting to the questions. With that, I see my time's expired, Mr. Chairman. I will yield and just submit the other follow-up questions for the record.
Gentleman yields back. The chair will now recognize Mr. Raskin for 5 minutes for questioning.
Mr. Chairman, thank you kindly. So the focus of the strategic plan, as I'm reading it, is to advance a user-centered vision of the Library of Congress. And I'm wondering how much of this effort is digital in nature versus work on the traditional pre-digital Library of Congress. I don't know if Dr. Hayden, you want to take the first slice at it.
Information technology is seen as a tool and a way of implementing, providing services to any type of user, modernizing the copyright registration process. It's seen as a tool in terms of digitizing unique and special collections, outreach. And so the effort in terms of digital, there's digital collecting. We'll be making sure that we are able to ingest things that are born digital. There's digitizing unique items, as well as using technology in the most effective way. So it is not a versus.
Yeah.
It's actually a way to provide more access and to preserve and conserve as well.
So really the vast majority of the resources would go into electronic means of delivering information to people regardless.
Well, what's really interesting and unique about the Library of Congress, the world's largest library, with so many formats, from film to those unique manuscripts to diaries, all types of formats, is that technology and delivery of the resources and services will not, it will be balanced. And so, for instance, in terms of the unique collection items that we have, most of those will still be in analog form because that's the way they are. So it will be a balance. We won't see an entirely electronic Library of Congress.
So help me conceptualize who the user is, or how do you guys conceptualize who the user is, and you know what fraction of the users encounter the library just online versus enter the doors and work there?
In terms of physical visits to the Library of Congress, the three buildings that are on the Capitol campus, the Jefferson Building, Adams, as well as the Madison, that's approximately 1.8 million people that walk through those doors a year. In terms of electronic use of the website, over 300 million uses of the Library of Congress website. And so that gives you a sense of the physical. There's also the Culpeper facility, and there are people who are utilizing that, coming for programming and other things. And the National Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. And then there's also the operation of the copyright process, and those are significant numbers as well.
Terrific. Okay, I'm going to yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. I want to thank each of you for being here as we continue our oversight of the Library of Congress and get a chance to get these updates. As a point of personal privilege, I have 5 more months and a few days left, and I will truly miss my role with the Library of Congress. Dr. Hayden, you've been a joy to work with. We look forward to the future. With that and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair additional written questions for the witnesses. And should you get those written questions, we would ask that you respond as soon as you could, so that those answers can be made a part of the record. Without objection, this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you. Oh, well.